Every church we went to, they had a known civil rights leader. And when you walked in there, they were teaching nonviolence.
Wow.
They were teaching meditation.
Wow.
They were teaching chanting and mantras and all of that.
Welcome to the Sacred Everything. I'm Travis Redtail, your host, and I've been asking, how do we heal society? How do we regain harmony with the planet? I'm inviting you to explore the practical and the pleasureful ways that we can transform ourselves, empower our communities, and catalyze a revolution of regenerative life in our neighborhoods and beyond. I'm interviewing folks from across the globe who are experts and pioneers making big changes in everything from our food system to mental health, from the circular economy to community singing. If you believe that a brighter future is possible, you're going to love the Sacred Everything. Welcome to the Sacred Everything podcast, the first episode with a live audience. Today we're joined by Robert Zack Zachary, who is an activist, poet, independent chaplain, visionary, and is going to be speaking tomorrow on Martin Luther King Jr. Day at, what is the?
Blue Ridge Community College.
Blue Ridge Community College.
Yes.
Let's have a round of applause for Zach.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
This is a new format for us, so it's
All
very
right.
exciting for me, and I'm really excited to have you here. We have crossed paths many times in Asheville, and
Yes.
there's a lot of connection with my eco community here. You've actually were a resident for a while. One of my mentors and mothers here in the city. You've mentored their son, and I'm just excited to hear about your path in storytelling and poetry and singing. Why? Because the Sacred Everything is founded on these three elements, the three medicines that are going to help make humankind in a more harmonious way with the planet, with ourselves, and with each other. And those three medicines are psychospiritual healing, community life revival, and nature reconnection. And your work touches on all three in many ways. And I feel like if every neighborhood had an elder to bring them together, carve out time to say, hey, it's important that we share our stories, that we share our gifts and our talents together, then this world would look really different. So I'm going to just hand it over to you as a sort of grounding space and ask you, what does it mean to be a carrier of stories, to be a carrier of poetry? What does it mean to be a teller of songs?
Thank you. And thanks for the invite. It becomes life-giving. The story, the avenue of being able to write a story in a story or a story in a poem. And what it means is being able to bring yourself to life and to the earth and to others in a natural way that's healing, that's all encompassing. It came from a deep place in my upbringing. And you asked the question, and I've been asked so many times, but we didn't think about it because our community, that was the life of our community, of the storytellers, the poets, the barbs, the musicians, the people who kept the legacy going through those entities. And as children, we got happy because when we saw certain people moving towards somebody's house, we were there. And we knew how to behave, and we sat on the floor. And one main house in our community, besides my own house, my parents' house, was Molly Moses' house. And Molly Moses was teaching us meditation at 7, 8 years old.
What year was that?
Oh, back in the 50s.
Wow.
Yes. And she was the community midwife and doula. And she was all of it. And at times there was only one white doctor in town who would come to the homes of Black people. And at times we would see Dr. Caffey leaving Molly Moses' house, not because she was ill, but to get some knowledge from those herbs and what have you. And sometimes my father bought 5 acres of land in 1949 on the edge of the city somewhat. And on the other side of our property, about a block away, lived around 80 poor white families. And you could see Molly Moses many times. And there was communication between the two communities. And so you could see Molly Moses many times tracking over the hill, going to the white people, because they were in the same status as we were. Right. You had to be of a certain caliber to go to the local hospital. And so when they got pregnant, their mothers got pregnant and needed somebody. It was Molly Moses. And she never worked, but she was the doula for the whole community.
She was always working.
She never worked,
but she was always working.
And you know, many times my mother would say, take this to Molly Moses. And, you know, it would be a dish or something. And Miss Smith across the street or Miss Wright would see me. Where you going, sonny boy? Come by and y'all take this too to Molly Moses. And that's how the community took care of her. But she took care of the community.
Right.
Because when you got sick and what have you, she was right there. She was all over the place. My father had African American and Native American heritage in him, and my father knew how to talk the fire out of people. See, we're talking about a time when it doesn't matter what happened to you. You weren't going to the hospital. There was no admission.
You were just too poor. You were just too low class to
well,
be admitted
that was
into a
with
hospital?
that was the poor whites. Okay. Right. With us as African Americans, that was it. We were Black, and you weren't. This was a time of Jim Crow with the colored and white in everything you saw.
It's like you're an alien species walking up, and they're like, "We don't work on alien species. Sorry."
Yes, that was Jim Crow. I once wrote a story. I don't think we should tell it here, but I have only told it twice. Once in Atlanta and once in Sweden. It was called The Jim Crow Fascination with Shit. And I explain how I can understand, and this is what I wrote, that you have separate water fountains. I can always almost understand where you have separate waiting rooms. It's always thought that whites didn't want to be with blacks, but see, people don't realize that black people love being with themselves. Black people don't want to be with you either. You know what I'm saying? So we were just okay with that. But I went on down the line. I can understand. In the train station, you have the colored section and you had the white section. But what I can't understand is when it came to the shit houses,
the toilets,
the toiletas,
right?
The laboratories.
Laboratory.
Is how is it that why is it so important to separate human feces? They all going to the same place. Now, I don't have to finish the story, but I did finish it in Sweden and in Atlanta, and as I came through toward the end of the story and got to the end. Well, by the time I started, there was a woman who walked in, just nicely dressed and had on a nice dress and what have you, and she sat on the front row, and by the time I'd ended the story, there were people on the floor, and she was one of them, in laughter, because there's another part of the story. I don't know if you want me to continue.
Well, I mean, you've already told us that there was going to be people cracking up on the floor.
Yeah. Well, the real gist of the story was there used to be men who came by. Jones was one man who would come by the house, and he's the one that started this story off in me. And that's how I finished it. Jones was the rag man, the ice man, and Jones had 7 daughters, and he took care of all of them. And he was also the city dump man. Huh. He was always at the landfill, and so that's how he sent his daughters to school, because Jones would come by the house, and Jones was finding gold, silver, and everything else.
In the trash.
In the trash, you see. And so Jones
was he like the dump truck driver?
No,
he wasn't the trash man.
No, you weren't going to drive. Man. That's a good question. See, you were not going to drive the dump truck. The white man did that. That was the white man's job.
I see.
The black men were on the back of the truck.
Right.
And so Jones just did it all, but he only worked certain days of the week. The rest of the days, he's at the city dump. And you could do that, and he was making a living. It wasn't that he was employed by anybody. That's what he did, because he had found a gold mine, you see. And he sent his 7 daughters to college through working at the city dump. Well, it only got to be the 3rd daughter, because back then you were taught as family, your parents would send one through college, and then maybe the second one through college. Well, by that time, those two would come back and help the next ones.
Pay for.
So if you had 5 or 6 children, by the third daughter, they came and lifted the mother and Jones and the rest of the girls up, and we never saw them again because they had made it. You see, and
Right.
and I mean, it was just an order of the day because I was the last one, and it happened with me when I went to Atlanta to go to school. I was going to Morehouse, but I found out about Georgia State, and my parents sit me down and said, and with my youngest sister, and it's like, well, you will be living with us, my sister and brother-in-law, and we're not going to charge you because and all the other sisters are going to help you in college, and that's the way I went to school until I started helping myself because Georgia State was so cheap. But back to the end story. You see, Jones would come by the house and tell stories, and he worked. He also worked at the sewage where that black
where the poops collide.
Where the poop was going. Okay, I'm going to get in line. And he said there was one white guy there. Now, Jones swear that this was a true story. I do too. And the white guy was not that functional in the mind. And he would spend most of his time trying to determine which poop came from white folk and which poop came from black. And he would stand in the middle, and what he thought was from black folk, it would sweep it on that side and let it go down that sewage. And one day the sewage got going, and he wasn't watching, and it almost split his whole body open because it got too slick there in the Chockalaka Creek, and he couldn't work anymore.
So I mean,
but see,
like a deluge of poop, like mowed him over.
Right.
Oh,
you see, because basically, these stories were true because you had that mentality. If you've been taught a certain mentality for 1,000 years, it takes a lot of brain poop to get that stuff out of you. You see, and so you measure it like that. So basically, that's how we had the good time. If you see, it was the stories that ushered us forth.
Sure.
The stories, most of the time when I'm speaking with white audiences, I have to clarify that we were having a darn good time.
Right.
Okay. And because, because you after you've spoken and you have somebody coming up to you, I'm so sorry that these things happened to you. What in the hell are you talking about? Mm-hmm. We were having a good time, and we were living. We were just as rich as anybody else. We ate every day. Everybody in the neighborhood ate. Everybody in the neighborhood, my dad and them used to go fishing on Friday. Everybody went fishing on Friday. And in the right kind of weather, okay? I mean, you saw the fishing poles hanging out of the cars or the trucks or what have you. It was getaway. And they would stay until the next day.
They would just camp out
They would
fishing.
camp. Well, you can say camp out, but see,
Cowboy camp. They were sleeping in the back of the truck. They were getting drunk all night. What were they
I
doing?
love this. I love this.
How do you stay?
Because no. See, you go down by the river. There's a whole lot going on down by the river.
I see.
And it was some, as stupefied as Jim Crow was in Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia, there were some places down by the river, okay, just as more integrated as we are today, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because you go on back there in those woods and you come to a big old place and they frying fish, and it's black folk and white folk and everything going on, okay.
Right.
And it's whether you knew how to be cool or not. All right. And so they would, uh, Daddy would never take me and my sisters. Daddy did take my half sister, uh, but Mama wouldn't let him take us, But my half sister is the one that told us about a whole lot of this. But uh, they lived in people houses. And sometimes it would be white folk, and sometimes it'd be black folk. Some of these places, you ever heard of the Green Book?
I don't know the Green Book.
The Green Book was started up in New York. I forget who started it. Might have been NAACP. But the Green Book was a book put together from coast to coast of friendly places for blacks to stop when you're traveling.
Okay.
There were homes, there were hotels, motels, service stations. The Rockefeller family, and see, this is why I call it a psychosis. I know I get into a lot of things. This is why I call it a psychosis. The Rockefellers were one of the big time contributors to the eugenics research out there in California.
Wow.
But then the same folk created a service station called ESSO, ESSO, and every ESSO service station was in that book because it was black friendly, okay? And so when blacks were traveling, you gassed up at an ESSO.
Because you knew it was safe.
You knew it was safe because you didn't want to stop at those other places. And in some states, they even had it where when you stopped at an ESSO service station, the bathroom was clean.
So it was equal treatment, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it might have been a colored bathroom, but it was clean. Because most service stations you stop, well, it was either your dog wouldn't go in it,
right,
or it's out of order. That was it. And so basically, they went fishing, and there were hotels and motels, black owned, and a lot of these are white owned that accepted blacks. Okay. And they had all the recreational places, the glass bottom boat down there in Florida.
Yeah.
They that man always accepted blacks.
Wow.
And so we'll talk about that later. But they would come. My dad and them would come back the next day, and my dad had never brought home anything under 15 fish.
Wow. Even though they were up partying and cooking them all night and sharing and having a
yeah. Because see, these folk, they they were the giants of the community.
Right.
So they had it together. You're right. I mean, they did it all, but we had everything. And yeah, they had partied all night and done what they were doing, but they were serious. And so our house was mostly the fish fry house. Okay. So here come Daddy, here come Mr. Pope, all of them. And there was one woman, she had Parkinson's. Everybody called her Shaking After. Okay. Now, Shaking After would go on her own trip. And she ain't going with my dad and them.
Right.
Okay. But
she like going to that area. She like going fishing.
Oh, I don't know where Shaking After went, but I tell you what, they all sort of came back at the same time. Okay. And a lot of times Shaking After loved my mama. So according to how many people were waiting at our house for the fish fry, okay, Shaking After would bring her fish. Mr. Polk would bring his.
Right.
So, and us children, we cleaning fish.
Right.
And so everybody ate in the community.
Right.
Wasn't nobody hungry.
Right.
Well, you didn't have no homeless folk in the community because just in case if a homeless family came to the city, well, they were told, well, go up there, look, go up there to Mr. Zack's house. Now, don't go until you see Mr. Zack's car or truck back, and they having a fish fry tonight. And by Monday morning, I'm walking. My dad found a place for them to live because he had rental property and what have you. And I'm walking the children to school to get them in school. You see, and so it was a community that took care of everything and everybody. So we didn't need the police. You might have seen the police come in the community once every 2 weeks or once a month.
And they were coming
just driving through,
doing a patrol or something like that.
You're
supposed to drive through.
They weren't welcome.
They weren't,
and
welcome
they knew
around.
They weren't welcome. And so basically, if something was going on, mostly they would stop if it had to do with a white person.
Sure.
And so basically, the white policeman would say, "Look, y'all need to let him go. If you're going to whoop him, but don't kill him." And they just drive on off.
Wow.
Okay. Because basically, a white man had done something wrong, tried to get pudding. I need to stop.
I'm feeling just so grateful to be taken back to that time.
Yes.
And taken back to your neighborhood and feel the abundance of the fish fry and feel like, oh, I don't need to paint a story in my mind about your past as a Black person with insane hardships everywhere. You're I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving, right. And I'm abundant.
Yes. And that's the whole thing. And we as Blacks, a lot of time, we sit back and we talk about how whites interpret what we've gone through because we don't know anything about that. Now, hard times, okay, hard times.
Right.
But we had resilience.
Yeah, resilience.
We had everything we needed.
You had each other.
We had each other.
You had everything you needed because you had each other.
Yeah, we had the land.
Right.
We used to, growing up, you're learning in school and we would all hear about the Great Depression. And we used to ask my parents about the Great Depression. And both of my parents would just start laughing, or any other adult, like what depression?
Right.
Now, that depression wasn't for Black folk. We still ate. We were living off the land.
Right.
Okay. And so basically, this history is in abundance.
Right.
It's in abundance when you understand it in the way that it really happened.
And the way that your even your nervous system was operating
Right.
within it, right? Like that's how
Right.
you know that you're truly feeling support, you're truly feeling safety, is if you're
Yes.
not in a scare. And I mean, there's a lot of folks that are in university right now, folks that are trying to say, okay, um, the ancestral trauma of being a victim of slavery, etc., is going to be baked in your bones forever, and it's going to be really hard to get out.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about
Wow.
how you experience abundance and resilience. Is it because that ancestral trauma has been through and you've had to persevere for so long? Is it something that is still under the skin in many ways? I'm just curious because this is one of the most common narratives.
Well, that's I'm glad you brought that forth, because that's really interesting. Wow.
You getting a story out? You getting a poem out? He's got a poem for this.
I got to do that poem.
You got to do the poem
on this one,
or a song, whichever one you want. I want everybody to feel your poetry and feel your song. And I gotta say thank you for this story. This story was like, my dad grew up on 23rd Street in Chicago, in a pretty Mexican dominant neighborhood, and he's got a lot of cool stories about getting into trouble and not getting caught, and times.
Wow.
He talks about how rough it was, but really not from a hardship perspective.
Yes, right.
From a friends beating up on each other perspective. From in the same way that you were talking about segregation being somehow like embraced, like black people want to hang out with black people.
Right.
That is the way that he tells stories these days.
Yes.
Like, well, us and the Mexican kids and then the Polish kids. And it's hard for somebody in my generation to hear that and not just label it as racist.
Right.
That's where
it, you know what? It is racial.
It's racial.
It's racial.
It's not racist.
Right.
Yeah.
And something in the universal one, the Almighty. I did a thing one time. We would be miserable if the Almighty had not created all these different kind of colors and shades. Lord God of mercy. We would be, and I had to stop my great friend. He was the president of the school, and after I spoke, he said, we don't what is it? We don't see color around here. I said, John, look over here. See this beautiful black man. And the students went out, because basically, if we were colorless, Lord God, what would it be?
We can't even stand like a 5-day work week. We call Wednesday hump day because it's so regular and repetitive. So,
yes.
Yeah, I like the rainbow. Thanks, Creator.
They name not trauma. I remember black women of yesterday years, how they cherished, honored life, lived, breathed life stories with unnamed trauma. Their story not of trauma. Yet their first foot was so to exemplify and expound the greatness of how good God had been. They would rise in church or in the PTA meeting, in the mist on the streets downtown. Their first words was, I don't have a hard luck story to tell, even though I did not come through flowery beds of ease. Didn't have a silver spoon. But all in all, God's been good to me. Their story was not of trauma. Their theme story was not trauma. With renowned sophistication, pride, dignity, On the second leg of their expounding story, they told of how it may have gotten hard sometimes, how they lived with meager means, but God made a way out of no way. Their story was absent of the trauma. No sing song of downcast trauma on this enduring journey. This be how it got read into me. My mother being the one who had founded the story same after she blessed all of her children by name, each one standing at her bedside. She blessed her children's children by name. She then came back to the grandchildren, great grands of those who were standing by the bedside. As for me, Mama blessed my oldest son and his wife, the children who would come from her womb. Then she blessed my youngest unmarried son, yet went on to say, may the womb be blessed of whomever he chooses in marriage. Mama's story was without trauma, but yet of praise and thanksgiving, even at a time of pardon and going on home, going on over, for they refused to give way to trauma instead of giving of thanks. Upon the last words of my mother, after finishing the blessing and agreeing to wait for my sister in flight from before going on, blessing her last upon her coming forth, the same ritual upon her family and children, she sang forth her last lyrical life song. I am thankful to God Almighty that all of my children know God and are safe in his arms. Now I'm ready to go home. I then said, Mama, you going home, the doctor said in a few days. She sounded forth most briskly. I am not talking about that home your daddy built for all of us in 1939. I'm talking about home with the Son of the Almighty. I can see him now. Come the closing moments, like our dad 10 years hence, Mom raised her hand for the last goodbye, carrying her works of life before her, leaving to us all the many her life's legacy, in order we might move forth victors and overcomers. These mighty ones, left off the trauma syndrome. They knew not a syndrome definition of trauma. Their story was not of trauma. Zach, 2023. And I wrote that in response to the dear professor who wrote that book on African American trauma. Because we didn't think of it like that.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. We thought that white-bodied people were crazy. Yeah. We really did.
Right.
To construct and constrict and to come up with laws so dehumanizing.
And to be complacent for everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
You know, we would get with ourselves, and that's why we love being by ourselves, you know. This integration thing. We ain't interested, no, because we had to talk. You see what I mean?
I don't want to talk to these crazy people.
and rap back about these crazy folk that bring about so much disharmony, even amongst themselves. jobs, and we would just sit back and look. And it was the whole community, because basically it was one Black community. Uh, Everybody lived there. My community, the job for Black men was working at the pipe shop, because remember, Birmingham, Alabama was renamed Birmingham because it was sort of after the iron mills in Birmingham, England. So they discovered that iron ore in the mountains, same Appalachian mountains as are here, but and so Birmingham created and produced all this iron, and the city became rich. And Anniston was an offshoot of that. And
the town you grew up in was Anniston.
Right. Yeah. Right. And sort of was the outpost for processing that oil and making the iron fixtures like um, hydrants and what do you call those things? The
grates.
I think you grates and all like that.
Different stuff.
Well, most Black men worked at the pipe shop, but you didn't know it. I mean, we knew that a lot of our daddies worked at the pipe shop. My daddy never did. My daddy was a stonemason. But it was phenomenal because you never saw Mr. Harris, Mr. Drew, whomever, Mr. Winston, and nothing but they were sharp every time you saw them.
They were looking good.
They were looking good.
Right.
Now, it was black smut in that pipe shop, and you can imagine what it was doing to their lungs.
Sure.
A lot of those Black men, they didn't live that long.
Right.
Okay. But we never saw them come out of that pipe shop without being shot. Okay. Now, that was the pride that was in the Black community.
Right.
Okay. And so basically, what you had was a system of pride and allegiance and resilience. And so basically, when these men came home, it was a joy because that was family.
Right.
Now, that there was a system, and the system sort of interfered a lot. But when you talk about trauma, it affected us in a certain way, and I'm not saying that we didn't go through a lot of upheaval, even within families.
Right.
But what I disagree with is it has been laid on us. Black folk are that way. Black people are the number one people who would not opt to live in a derogatory way, to live in a disadvantageous way. And what I mean is, we have always been a proud, high-minded, high-thinking people.
Right.
I don't know if any human beings would decide to just live in shacks. And you hear about in Bombay, people living in boxes and and just have nothing.
Right.
That's not those people's fault.
Right.
Somebody got into that illegal zoning stuff and putting people in this way and taking everything from people.
Well, they take
So
their and in India specifically, it's
yeah,
farmland.
yeah.
I mean, they can't
Thank you.
afford to live on the farmland, so you move to a city, but you can't afford to be in the city.
You can't afford to be in the
Right.
city. That's it. And the same thing happened in this country, and this is what happens to capitalism and with capitalism, because basically, who really built America? I mean, from the farms to Washington, D.C., it was black folk. America got real scared after the Civil War, and this had been discussed in Congress. Is if we get rid of slavery,
Who's going to do
what in
all
the
the
hell
work?
we gonna do?
Yeah.
Now, that's a simple way of putting it: is who's going to do all the work? Now, who's going to run this country? Look, see, we forget. Black folk were the farmers. We were the farmers. I mean, if you look at it, um, before was it Jamestown or that other Plymouth? Before Plymouth,
Mm-hmm.
there were 36 trials of communities. Sir Walter Raleigh was responsible for a lot of them. He'd bring a shipload of English over and leave them and go back to England and doggone come back in 6 months or 9 months and everybody's dead. He'd go again, leave those and 36 trials who didn't have sense enough to walk across the field and ask the Native Americans, how do y'all do it?
Right.
Okay. And so these people, they knew nothing about farming, a lot of them.
Right.
Okay. And so when the African Americans were brought, and here we go, 1619. They only told us about 1620, the pig and the Mayflower, but it's the truth. I don't know why people fight against the truth. It was just the truth that, okay, the African Americans were brought here in 1619. So you have to go back to 1619. You got to put it a year back. Okay.
Is that East Indies, Caribbean, or was that on mainland?
No. That's in this country.
It's in this country.
That's in this country because they came with Columbus, remember, in 1492, and they had been coming, but in this country, United States, continental America, the first slaves were brought in 1619.
Wow.
Well, basically, it sort of capped off at 400,000, near 400,000. Well, basically, we became the farmers.
Right.
In everything, just not cotton, but tobacco. And down there in South Carolina was pretty much a swamp. From if you go to Columbia, South Carolina today, and start driving down toward the ocean,
mm-hmm.
it's marshland.
Right.
And so we're the ones who figured it out.
Right.
The what's his name? The slave master didn't know nothing. Okay. And so we told the slave master, say, look, ain't no cotton gonna grow here. Fool. No cotton going to grow here. Look, we know we know what you're doing. You're going back to Africa to get some more slaves. While you there, get some rice seeds.
Mm.
This is land that rice grow in, marshland.
Right.
And the slave was thinking all the time, because you let us grow some rice and we're going to grow it to the sea, and then we're going to get the hell on. Okay? Think about Porgy and Bess, you know, the great musical. Oh, Lord. You know, I have a nephew, and he did Porgy and Bess not too long ago. I don't know which song I love in Porgy and Bess, the greater ones, you know, because we started singing it in the 8th grade, and that's, you know, and then I was blessed to see Leontine Price be Bess, and I think it was William Warfield as Porgy. Oh, I got plenty of nothing, nothing's plenty for me. I got no car, got no mule, got no misery. The folk with plenty of plenty got a lock on the door. Fred, somebody's a going to rob 'em while they out making more. What for? I've got no lock on the door. That's okay with me. They can steal the rug off the floor. That's be nice to see, 'cause the things that I like the stars and the skies, all are free. Oh, I've got plenty of nothing. Nothing's plenty for me. I've got no car, got no mule, got no misery. Y'all like that? Now, that was another one that my music teacher introduced when we were in the 8th grade. And I had a time with it, because, you know, I was in this Sanctified Holiness church, you know, and they all preach hellfire and brimstone, Lord Jesus. And I didn't know if I should sing that song. And I sort of brought it up to my music teacher, and she said, you know what? She said, me and your sister took music together and went to school together and took music from Dr. Lillian W. Foreman.
No way.
And if you bring that up to me again, I'm going to tell your sister, and I'm going to tell Dr. Foreman too. I said, all right. And I sang it. Oh, it ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years, but who called that living when ain't nobody giving a man who is 900 years? It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The thing that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so.
Woo!
Lord God.
Zach, you are
So,
you are you are a dynamo. I think that's a word people used to use. I think it means you're dynamic.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's what they would say about those opera singers.
Well, first of all, most people who are here both online and in the audience don't know that you were in the choir of overseas. Maybe you did say that in the beginning,
Yes.
but you were spreading messages while you were in the Army as a choir member to folks. And that was during Vietnam. That was during the Vietnam War.
That's
You
right.
you opted
That's right.
into military service
That's right.
so that you could sort of avoid going to the front line. Is that right?
Right.
And they got a hold of you real quick. They learned what you were all about with your vocal talent.
Yeah, that was interesting because I was first sent to this little German town called Bad Kreuznach. Bad, which meant it was when you saw Bad, sort of means bath in German, and when you saw it, it was like it was natural, a spa setting there. You know, they had natural springs and everything.
Did they have like saunas?
Yeah, and all like that.
It was like
All
it
that.
was a bath community.
Yeah, but that's interesting because most of the GIs didn't know that. Didn't know anything about Germany. They didn't even know the proper name, Deutschland. And when they got there, they just sit up in the barracks. And that's what they told you to do. You know, before we got there, they sit us down in Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson, and said, do not go on the German economy, and we got everything for you. And they sure did. The third day I'm in Bad Kreuznach, I am downtown. Okay? Hell no, you're not going to shut me up. I'm in Europe. And I told my mama when I was 10 or 11, I said, I'm going to Europe when I get grown. And she said, why you going to do that? And I said, well, I got to go and understand how the European went around the world and wreaked havoc on the whole world, starting with Columbus. She said, go on, boy. But 20 years old, I was right there.
There you go.
And I had to go downtown. Well, I was in a unit. I have this story in my book. Uh, I was a clerk typist, and they put me in. It was 7 other guys, and we typed up traveling orders for military personnel who had gotten into trouble or acted up. And most of these people, you would think they weren't the little guys, you know, they could control us. They were the colonels and the generals and the high sergeants having orgies at their home and all kind of stuff. And it was confidential. You couldn't talk about General so-and-so doing this with his wife and there's 2 other women, all like that. So anyway,
but that was those were scripted in the travel orders. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, they were sending them back home to either face charges. They were getting them out of Europe.
I see.
Because you're embarrassing the U.S. Army.
You couldn't talk about it, but you knew everybody's
dirt.
Yeah,
we knew everybody's dirt, but you had a high security, so couldn't talk about it. Well, we would go to work at 7:30, on time every day. Well, from around 7:30 to 8:15, these guys would start talking about what they did to their woman the previous night. I thought it was the most disgusting. Ooh, I'm
just
ready to cuss.
Disrespectful.
Yeah. Look, if it was their wives, girlfriend, whomever, okay, and they would go around the room, and they would always get to me, and I said, "No,
yeah,
no,
it's my private business.
That's private. It's icky anyway. So I didn't like being there, and I to this day, and I started to think I'm right. I think they sort of orchestrated me to get the hell out. Amen.
They found your
Yeah,
icky spot, and they
yeah.
were just
And so basically, what happened is I would go to the library. I was so bored, and I'd go to the library every night. And this one Thursday night, I'll never forget. This young white lieutenant walks in, and I listen to classical music, and he walks in and he said, "You listening to that?" I said, "Yes." And he looks at the stereo and looks at me and said, I said, "Yeah, that's Beethoven Piano Concerto number 4." He said, "Hot damn, you don't need to be here. You be in my office in the morning." And I said, "Yes." And he asked me where I worked and everything. And I went to the sergeant, and the sergeant knew, and he said, "Yeah, go on over there." So I sort of think
something's
it was set
happening.
up,
Yeah, something's happening
So
here.
I got to his office, and he said, "Listen, I was very serious last night. You don't need to be here. Uh, I know of a course, a professional choir in the military, and it's in Heidelberg, Germany. And I've already called, and I want to clear it with you." And I said yes. And so he booked it the next month, and he and his girlfriend, his German girlfriend, took me. I went there. It was an audition. It was 24 other soldiers. They had 4 spots. And I went in and did my thing. Okay. And I had auditioned for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra course and made it. And that's when we were going to do Beethoven's Ninth. And I volunteered for the military, so I never actually sang with them, but that was in my portfolio. And they finally came out at the end of the day, and hot damn, they called my name. I made it
Wow.
out of 24 guys.
They wanted
and
you they wanted your baritone.
Yep,
They
that's
wanted your
right.
baritone, baby.
I was baritone. And I joined the course, and it was awesome. It was 26 guys in the military with music background, and we were called the general ambassadors. And sure enough, we mostly sang to Germans and to the army brass. And you know, I said something a while ago to you when you said racist. I went in on the premise of I went in and there was some things going on. They said Captain Smith didn't know how to direct, and he didn't. He really didn't. Okay. But what they did and what they shouldn't have done, well, I wouldn't say they shouldn't have done, but it was always 6 black guys in the course. It was 26 in the course, 6 black guys. They had that quota. So they, in trying to get him out, said, he was also racist because of that.
He wasn't racial. He was racist.
Well, he was racist, yeah. So anyway, it went up to the IG, the Inspector General in the military. And so I was called in. And so the IG sit me down. And he said, "Do you think Captain Smith is racist?" I said, "Sir, I just got here. I don't know anything. But my training is I don't determine whether somebody is racist. That's up to them. I don't believe in that. I think you can be racial, but not racist." So anyway, I went on, and so about 3 months later, the main colonel came in, and he had to verdict. And he walks in and he says, "Who is Specialist Zachary?" I said, "I am." He said, "Stand up." And I stood up, and he said, "You're the only intelligent guy in here. I'm thinking about taking the other 25 of you and sending you down to get your fatigues and your gear and your N16 and sending you to the field forever." You know,
that had to make you real popular.
I was.
I'm sure you were a favorite after that.
I was well, well, in a way.
You get stuffed in a locker after that or something?
Well, but you know what? They were watching me though by that time. Now this colonel didn't know what I was doing, but I had a black sergeant, and he was tracking me, and he would look at me, and he called me in, "Zachary, what you do this weekend?" And I wondered, my wife was over there. Why is he calling me? And she was very perceptive too. He said, he watching you. So one day he called me in and he said, "Listen, I know what you've been doing. We've been tracking you to CID. The CID is the FBI of the military, okay? Now, you have to understand, I'm in this prestigious course, but I was trained by the great civil rights leaders, okay? So I didn't have no better sense than to continue my activism in the military, okay? So what I was doing, he said, "We know what you've been doing." He said, "Every time we go to a different Army facility, Stuttgart, Berlin, anyway, the black GIs rise up and some of the white ones do too." I said, "Well," he said, "you the instigator." I said, "We can't use you in this course anymore." I said, "Okay." So they fired me from the course.
They fired you from the course.
And I went downstairs to the CEO. He said, "I've never heard of anybody being fired in the military." He said, "The only thing we got for you is a duty soldier." And I became a duty soldier. And, I cleaned the latrines and I swept the leaves. But that's a whole nother story because in the end, I continued organizing the guys. And
wow.
We really had a time.
Wow.
It ended up that we actually had one of the few demonstrations, few protests in the military, right there in Heidelberg, Germany.
Wow.
So
what a beautiful way to pull the thread from your. Yeah. I'm sure your activist mentors and forefathers are rolling around right now, like in stitches, but also maybe a little tear of pride and happiness for that, right? I mean, that's pretty fearless of you to be on military duty and then causing a ruckus and stirring up that type of energy in the confines of the military institution.
Right.
Was it dangerous to do that?
I mean, it was dangerous. And they said the day that we did the protest that that's interesting, that really they had military police ready to take me and the two women in my other right hand to Fort Leavenworth,
which is a detention or something like
Fort
that.
Leavenworth is in Kentucky.
Oh,
it's the what's that prison? It's the military prison where you don't get out.
Wow,
you're there for 20 years,
right?
But I didn't learn of this until I went back to Germany and met. And I'm not telling you the whole story. A lot of this is in my book, but I sit down with the E7 E7 sergeant, and he said, they really wanted to send you to Fort Leavenworth, especially you. And they had documents on you longer than several miles long. But the Masons, the Black Masons of the military said no.
Wow.
And would not let them touch me.
Wow.
They
had a sort of informal or some kind of pull.
The head Mason in there was a 3-star general, General Davison, and he got with everybody else, and so I was well protected. Wow. But it sort of bring memories to me, and it's very sacred to me, my life and the stories, because from birth, I can remember Black men had a certain role in the Black community, and if you were a boy child, in my house or any of my friends' house, the men sitting there when we would walk in, and it started about 6 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. They just began to talk, and they would say, listen, you're getting older now, and you'll be going downtown. And basically, they would teach us how to maneuver and navigate around white people. Mm-hmm. And my daddy, Mr. Sammy J., Mr. Winston, all of my friends, my Uncle Mac, when I brought my friends to his house, say the same thing. If you go downtown, you see 2 white girls walking on the same sidewalk. If it's 2, you cross the street. Mm-hmm. Just basic things. That's one reason why we didn't have more Emmett Tills.
Emmett Tills?
Emmett Tills. Then Emmett Till was the 14-year-old who they killed in Mississippi. The white woman said that he whistled at her and asked her for something. And he was from Chicago. And they went to the land where his grandparents lived and took him. And his face was so messed up when they found him that the mother said, we're going to have an open casket. This is sort of what helped start off the civil rights movement.
Right.
Okay. But because those people taught us how to maneuver.
Right.
And it was surely so. And this being King's birthday weekend, it was surely so during the civil rights movement. And when I began going to the mass meetings, and my uncle was a great part of the civil rights movement and knew Dr. King, those leaders did not play. We would have mass meetings. They were very serious. I remember the first time we had a boycott in my high school, and we were directed, it was well organized. We were directed to go to certain churches and not go to school. and we did what you call church hopping. and it was awesome. But we sort of felt like, oh, we're going to have a good time out of school. Every church we went to, they had a known civil rights leader. And when you walked in there, they were teaching nonviolence.
Wow.
They were teaching meditation.
Wow.
They were teaching chanting and mantras and all of that.
Wow.
It was so I come up, as I told the story of the military, I am thrust in the midst of black men and black women in the military. We knew how to order ourselves.
Right.
We knew we had been well taught. Some of them had been in the Black Panther Party. Some of them Muslims. All of us had some kind of experience.
Yep.
And so basically, this is how it was laid out in the African American experience. And I think this is sometimes what don't get over to the masses of people,
right?
Even our own children or just young people, period. It just was not Martin Luther King. The eloquent sermons that you hear, we sort of didn't think anything of them because you could go in any local black church and hear an eloquent sermon.
Right.
You see what I mean?
There was
I
discipline.
mean, even in my little old sanctified holiness church, my pastor had a 3rd grade education. I still remember this sermon that he spoke about the 3 things that had to happen before a Christ could come. And, this man did it. I mean, and he had it down pat.
Right.
About the Romans, the Roman Empire had to come forth in order to build the roads so the news could spread. I mean, he had it. It was a sermon that you would hear in the seminary.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Right. With a 3rd grade education.
Yeah, with a 3rd grade education. But that same man, right after, the library was integrated. Well, see, there in Anniston, I was one of the main ones, just heading up everything. And it was one doggone thing I wasn't going to do is sit in the back of the bus.
Mm.
So they sort of put me off the bus forever. Okay.
You couldn't even get on the bus.
I couldn't get on because those white bus drivers, nope. And would stop the bus and,
even in like the most progressive black town in the South, you still had white bus drivers telling you can't be on the front.
Yes, because Jim Crow was the rule.
It's the rule.
I like that Anniston was progressive because I say in explaining it sometimes is that black folk knew their place in Jim Crow, but guess what? White folk knew their place too.
Right.
You think you're gonna come up here in a white neighborhood and with your guns? No, you've gone too far.
Right.
Because and some of us might die, but some of y'all gonna die too. Okay. They knew their place, and the cowards that they were, they had a little common sense. Okay.
Right.
Now we will abide by. We ain't got to drink your water, do whatever.
Poop in your toilets.
Right. But we got families, and you cannot deal in that way. So basically, I would the high school was on the other side of town, and we used the city bus. And because I couldn't use the city bus, I gladly and proudly walked home every day. And I wanted to walk home anyway. Because earlier, at 12 and 13, we had a little thing going with the white kids, okay? And but basically, this was before the library was integrated, but I want to finish that part. Is that after the library was integrated, that man, that pastor, my pastor, I would see him many times walking home from school in the library studying. And so that was big. It's opening up opportunities. You see what I'm saying? That's all we wanted. We didn't want to be with nobody. We were with ourselves. See, that wasn't the thing. We wanted the opportunities. So we had a little one-room library in our neighborhood. Okay, I'd read almost every book in there.
Right. Not enough knowledge in one room.
So I got to a point, and they passed the Civil Rights Bill in 1964, 65. And I decided, okay, the Civil Rights Bill just passed. I'm going to the white library that's nearer to my house. You know, those 80 white families that lived over there. They had a nice sized library, but I couldn't go.
You couldn't go in there before.
And I walked down there and walked in. And there was a white woman sitting there. And she says, "May I help you?" Very nice. And I said, "Yes, I want to check out some books." She said, "Yeah, go ahead." Little Zachary boy. She knew who I was.
What?
I wonder how she knew who I was.
Because of the buses? How did she know who you were?
No, I don't think you need to. You should try to guess that one. That's something you don't know. I haven't told you.
You had a little something going with the white boys. That's why.
Oh, you no, that's you close, but no, not quite. No, not quite. She knew my daddy. She knew my daddy. My daddy was a stonemason, but my daddy made his real money selling liquor.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Zachary.
And he sold it to uppity white folk.
Right.
We remember when he said he ain't gonna sell no more to those poor ass white folk on the other side of us. I'll tell you that story later. But you know, he sold uppity white folk. You know, the mayor and all like that. You know, the mayor would come by, and Dad would take care of the liquor. We didn't know what Dad was doing, but I would be sent out because he would always come by on a Sunday, and his wife would tell him, "Make sure you get some of Miss Zachary's good rolls," and they were hot out of the oven. And Mama would say, "Take that out there to Claudia," and I'd take it out there, you know. But and he sold to uppity black folk, you know, my teachers and all like that. So I couldn't act up. What I only had one teacher to tell me in the 8th grade or 9th grade, "I know your dad."
That's the real threat.
And I by then it was in the 9th grade. I began to figure it out, you know, because we would watch Miss Wilson. You know, these were old schools, so it always had a closet room in the back. and she would give us our assignment, and then she'd go back there in the closet and stay for about 5 minutes, and then come back and sit down. And then they'll say something to her, and then go back there again about 5 minutes. She drinking my daddy's liquor.
Hey, got you some books.
God. Okay.
This is what I'm hearing. I am hearing that you grew up in this community that took care of each other, that these stories and that collective story about segregation and the sort of pre-civil rights racism being just nothing but hard times for Black folks. That's not your lived experience. That's a myth. And it was sort of because of the hard times, in fact, that folks had to be resilient. They had to teach their kids what was the way to survive in the downtown area. I mean, I'm hearing these things about we talk about this, how children don't get initiation anymore into manhood. They don't get initiation into adulthood, rites of passage. And you were living in a life or death situation if you effed up in that space. So it's so interesting to me that we think about rites of passage and we think about these initiation trials happening in a far off civilization, in a hunter-gatherer society, in something more esoteric. And you, still living, still breathing, still walking, had a life or death thing to deal with when you were a kid.
Oh, yes.
And you're painting the Black community in a totally different light in my mind. So I just want to let you know how impactful these stories are on me, and how these things that I long for, the reason why I live in eco villages, intergenerational living, community potlucks, feeling with proof that if I'm down on my luck, I'm going to have somebody there to help me out. You don't feel that in an isolated suburban home. It's hard to feel that.
Thank you.
So I'm just picking all these up.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we first came here, I first came to Earth Haven. They asked me, well, what do you know about this?
Right.
I said, hell, I know more than you.
I lived in a real community. You lived in real community.
You want to talk to me about it? You know what I mean?
Bunch of people in the woods trying to make it up.
And it's usual. It's so fascinating. And I spoke with people who want me to come and speak in February, and again, it's all white. And I had to tell them, no, I'm not coming about any guilt. And I think we do need to have conversations. Just what you're saying is basically there are so many misconceptions about how it was and how it's been and what it is now. We need to start having some conversations. And because it is on a plane of some erroneous information that's getting through, and had nothing to do about how we came forth. It was a very definite kind of thing that Black and white people needed each other, especially in the South.
Right.
Okay. And we need to go back and rehash what really happened in this country during slavery and after slavery and Reconstruction, and why, who really had to fear? Who really felt put out and all is lost?
Right.
And it's something in our DNA that it just doesn't occur because, you know, you grow up hearing elders saying, you know, God will make a way out of no way. And that began to ring with you.
Right.
And you begin to look around and, you know, you don't understand all of the givens and there were just so many instances where we saw Black people negotiate themselves out of trauma or tragedy. And
what do you mean negotiate? Like talk themselves out?
well, if talking was necessary, sometimes just actions. Because
they navigated their way out of a bad situation, basically.
Constantly we had to do that.
Right.
Because we realized that we were dealing with fools. Now, I will say something here, and I tomorrow I have it in my speech, how I sit down with 11 Native American elders out at Salt Lake City back in 2015, I think it was. And we really had a talk, and I related this to them, and you know we cried, we laughed, we did it all because I said, you know, our elders knew one thing. We learned this coming on the ships, and we by the time we got here, is something that we understood, that these people had to be fools. And it's one thing you don't do is go up against a fool.
Right.
Because a fool will kill you.
Hmm.
Okay? And so basically, you know, we hear different theorists today talking about, you know, people were Uncle Toms and bowed down to the white man. No, but, and it's been so explained so eloquently by a lot of great historians. You better wish you were an Uncle Tom. A lot of people who accusing others of being Uncle Tom never read the book.
Right.
Okay. Uncle Tom was most intelligent because what he was doing, he was really outwitting his master.
Right.
He was taking the fall for all the other slaves so they wouldn't take the fall. And the white master never understood. Okay? And so the white master almost beat him to death. But he wouldn't beat nobody else but Uncle Tom. Okay? And so Uncle Tom, and that's where we I used to watch black men, even my daddy, yassa, 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 white man come around, yassa, 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 almost. Oh Lord.
You don't seem
But
like
then
that.
let that white man leave. Let that white man leave. One time my mother spoke about it. And she said, remember how intelligent your daddy was, how he protected us, how he yesed that white man. But he made a fool out of him. I said, yes. We all said yes. And I saw it over and over again, is knowing how to pet peeves that personality. Okay.
I mean, this is politics.
It was
Basically, knowing who is your
thank you.
counterparty, knowing who your
Thank you.
audience is.
Yes.
That is a
Yes.
that's an
It was
intelligence a
deep.
lot of people
It was
don't
deep.
have.
That's right.
A lot of people
And
don't have that.
we
Yeah.
didn't have PhDs, but they did.
Right.
They had PhDs of life to know their enemy to that extent.
Right.
And then to come home and I mean, knock down, drag out laughters.
Right.
All over.
Right.
You know, I could tell you something. You know, I never forget how Mr. I ain't gonna even call his last name because his grandchildren might be listening. White man kicked him all over downtown. And I went to school with his children. And later on, that man came to our house. That's the biggest white fool I've ever known. Okay, I'm gonna tell you what was going on. Mister. Oh, come on. Now look, I don't want.
You gotta say names.
I know it, and you know, I sometimes I've done storytelling and I've gotten zeros from my dear LBGTQ friends and others and all like that. But I mean, I'm just telling the truth. Mr. So-and-so had impregnated the white man's wife and the 25-year-old dog.
Ooh.
Okay.
Wow.
And so basically, you know, well, it was happening all over.
Right.
And it happened so much so. I mean, look at the color complexities in this country. You know what I mean? In my hometown, we figured it out as children. Damn, over there between Quintard and the alley that go down after Layton, all the way up, the black kids were light skinned. Because the white folk lived on Quintard and on one side of Layton. And then you had to go between alleys, okay? And then you had Mundy's store, and he had sons, and all every one of those 7 sons had a baby by not one black girl, but the several. Okay,
this is nature. You put humans next to humans,
and you know, and this in Alabama,
they're gonna procreate.
That's it.
Yeah,
and I got some in my family now. Okay, so who's upset? You know, and
the fools were upset.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and
the fools
still
were
are.
upset.
You know, I mean, and what make them more upset is, you know, the worst thing that can be. What about the time? You know, the worst.
We gotta wrap it up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the worst things that America's faced with. I'm gonna get into it a little bit in tomorrow. It's denial. It's denial. It's lying to yourself. That's what it is. We say denial, but it's really lying to yourself, sitting up lying to yourself. That's like talking to yourself in 4 walls.
Yeah.
After a while, those lies will start slinging stuff back at you. You know, it is like the boomerang effect. The lies will start telling the truth on you.
But it's not just in my experience. And before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to get your advice on a very selfish and really sensitive topic right now. I'm a white male and I walk on eggshells every day because I've become the target for all the problems in the world, which, based on my ancestry, if you look at my Mesoamerican heritage and my Arabic heritage and all the things, yeah, there's parts of me and there's parts of me that have been the victim, have been the indigenous part that has been conquered as well. it's like impossible for me to talk about race, impossible for me to talk about, I guess you'd say, gender politics, around most of that without feeling like I'm going to get canceled. And I'm not making a foray into those political conversations most of the time because I just feel frozen. Like I don't
Yeah,
want to get attacked
yeah.
in that. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend anybody, first of all. And I'm curious, you've lived such a different life than me. And you have the power to speak your perspective. I feel like we're on really different sides of the table at the moment. What advice do you have for me who feels like I'm walking on eggshells? I'd like to engage in conversations around race. I'd like to actually be a supportive ally around racial issues, but it's like I'm frozen. I'm frozen. I don't even want
Uh,
to touch it. That's where I'm at. I don't want to touch it. So
well,
what can you say to me?
replace the eggshells.
Okay.
Yeah, I ain't gonna walk on no eggshells.
Yeah, I'm not gonna walk on any
Yeah,
eggshells.
look. What did Jeremiah said? It's like spies shut up in my bones. I'm gonna tell the truth.
Yeah.
Okay, I, I do. I do think it is necessary. We have to preface a lot of this stuff, okay, because it's been put out there incorrectly.
Right.
A lot of this whole commotion and conflict has been instituted by white supremacists. And remember um, during the election 2016, I'm reading and trying to find because I knew I was doing right to go to the women march and everything. I wasn't gonna miss that. I got pictures, okay, but all during that time, and Hillary running and
Right.
Barney and all like that, and here it is, China, Russia, and the right wing, and they were saying it's going to be a demonstration here, and you go, and it's opposition there.
Right.
Okay, so basically, I ain't got time to walk on eggshells.
Right.
I think it is a time to expose, but I think what we all need to do who have a little bit of consciousness, of holistic principles, is to pull back a little bit on this calling out and putting down.
Right.
Okay? Because everybody is not responsible for the devastation.
Right.
Okay? Now, if we saying that it's 1 to 2% that got all the money now, and a lot of those families were dealing with the slave trade and all like that. Okay, everybody should not be dumped in the same bucket. But see, this is what happens in a capitalistic system:
Right.
is the powers that be are constantly dividing and at the same time dumping everybody in and making other people feel, even progressive folk, that you need to call somebody out. Don't try to call me out because look, uh, I might find something on you. And you know what? I'm not gonna do you like that.
Right. Not gonna
We
play
need
that
to
game.
we need to understand that this is political, and we are trying to find our way back home. We're trying to find our way back home because we've all been pulled so far away. So nobody has the prerogative to feel like they are the authorities on my life or the other half of our lives. We are all seekers. And when we get into that, okay, then there is a time that men need to talk about their male chauvinist BS.
Right.
And sometimes women might be the best to start the conversation with us, and we need to sit down somewhere and listen.
Right.
But do it with kindness, with appreciation of who we've been. Okay.
Right.
See, there's a lot of separation. So basically, we need to understand that it is a definite effort,
right,
of the powers that be, the dominant culture. They will have functions to separate everybody on the level of where you are. See, they come with racism, they come with sexism, they come with all the isms, capitalism. Now, you know, all the isms I have a problem with because they're isms.
right,
And if you're not careful, the way this society is built, that the way it is built up, we might be looking at fascism. Okay, we might be looking at that kind of thing. So,
right.
what I'm saying is,
when you have a lot of people going around policing each other
all
the time,
that is the best word.
Telling,
you know what,
giving me the eggshells and giving you the eggshells, and
but you know, and what they have been able to do is convince each other, us, to do that.
Right.
We don't need. I think if you look at the history of policing, when you really look at the history of policing across the board should be outlawed, because policing started in this country to watch slaves, to keep up with slaves.
Right.
And so basically, we as human souls don't need to be policed. A man in a male chauvinist society, and then he goes to the King James Version, women, obey your husband, and men run with that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
My dad had come home talking about that, and my mama was very religious. My mama would have given my dad a look.
Take that King James crap out of here.
No, but yeah.
Yeah.
And my mama was the church person. My daddy wasn't no church man, but my daddy knew better than that.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so basically, this system is able to put us against each other on every other level that comes up.
I mean, this is the colonial tactic of divide and conquer.
Thank you.
And that is happening so subtly,
right,
in ways that my eggshell walking, and like, I love checking my privilege. In fact, I started with the awareness of checking my privilege in grad school, in urban planning school, where I'm a white dude going to walk into a lot of different neighborhoods of different colors, of different backgrounds and different orientations. And if I'm feeling attacked from that narrative, that's a problem. That's a dominator problem. That's using the tools of awareness in a way that's going to cause me some version of fear, some version of creating a narrative that I'm perpetuating a hurt right now that perhaps I have been. So I appreciate your answer, right? Which is,
thank you.
Stand your ground and don't let yourself get divided, right? I mean, that's the bigger,
and
the bigger one.
We have to work as comrades.
Right.
We have to work together.
Right.
You know, it's just the only way. We are feeding the system when we step into calling out and divide and division and thinking that our plan is the best for liberation and all like that. I don't know the damn thing. I don't know nothing.
It's the mystery, man. You don't
It's
know nothing about
you
the
know
mystery.
really,
A lot of
and
people
so
think they have the right
yeah,
answer.
no,
You should just walk through and say,
we are the answer to walk together,
yeah, right.
to strive together,
That's the
and
only way.
to find our way back home. Because when we find our way back home, we are beginning to find our way back home more and more because our eyes are becoming open
Right.
to the untruths
Right.
and to the truth. Okay.
Right.
And somebody have lied to us down the line. Somebody's lied to you. Somebody's lied to you. Somebody's lied to me on principles with women. They've lied on principles of womanhood, of
Right.
womanhood. Okay.
Right.
When it comes to men and that whole thing of you the man, you got the word and you say no, I can't do that.
Right.
I'm not made up that way,
Right.
and I'm sorry if somebody want me to be that. I cannot be that because that ain't me,
Right.
and God didn't make me that way.
Right.
Okay, and so I don't have to be the dominant one in the family and all like that. That's a fool.
So we can check each other. We
We
can help each other
Yeah,
grow.
we can
We can
help each
do
other
that.
grow,
But if it turns into
but
policing,
right,
then we're doing it
yeah,
in a bad way.
right,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I, I even struggle with how to help. I appreciate all the help I can get.
How to help and to ask for help, asking
Yes,
for help.
thank you.
Well, Zach Zachary, I'm just like I'm feeling so jazzed up right now. I'm feeling
Thank you.
like I understand the history of your experience, right? And if your experience is telling of the history of a lot of Black folks growing up in the civil rights era,
Mm,
I'm feeling like I'm more in touch with that a lot of the stories that I inherited,
mm.
not from Black people,
Yes,
are getting rewritten right now
right,
in my
right.
mind and in my heart. I'm looking at these ideas of like initiation and figuring out how to survive as a kid under those conditions,
Mhm.
about the belonging and the connection that you have with your family, and how like we're going to take care of you is probably a more secure feeling than how
Yes,
big is your 401k. I
thank you.
mean, those things they're bouncing around in my
Yes,
body, and I want to be in that community right now,
amen.
so I appreciate you. I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast, and yeah, I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.